Hello, world. Let's see, I'm a little crooked this morning. All right, we're going to pick up where we left off. Hello from Georgia family. I love it. My roots are in Georgia, Atlanta. Some of them. Some of them are in Birmingham now. Some of them are in California. All right. If you've never gotten this book, this is a great read. That sounds really self-promoting, but why would we write something if we didn't think it was going to be good and good for you to read? In case you haven't heard me talk about it, Rainbow God, the Seven Colors of Love. It's how to take kind of a personal inventory on how have you experienced God indirectly through the broken areas, systems of each area of culture. We all grew up affected by family, education, government, arts, entertainment, media, religion, etc. And those were all meant to be ways that we experience and encounter who our God is, but they're still being redeemed. These areas of culture still don't look a whole lot like our Papa yet and the way he would do these areas of culture. And so we all grow up with different lies that we've believed about God and about ourselves, about others, because of the brokenness of these areas of culture. So when you go through this book, it really helps you take a personal inventory of, wow, so what are some potential lies that I've believed about God that maybe I'm even still helping perpetuate about him in each area of culture? And we've thought kind of a very narrow way of thinking as Christians, in that we think, oh, we just need to get people saved who are involved in these different areas of culture. But it's so much more than that. It's God's kingdom coming to earth, and his kingdom is the king's better way of doing everything. So that's my little plug for this book. We do have this book in stock, and we also have it on audio. So it's a great way to kind of listen to it while you're doing other things. Put your little earbuds in. Yesterday, we began the section in the chapter on Redeemer, the color blue of love. God is love. And we started the section called Who is God as Redeemer? And, just a refresher, my go-to is how do I know that I'm being successful every single day? How do I know that what I'm doing is connected to God's original intent for me? And so years ago, I just kind of put together this basic statement that helps orient me, and maybe it will do that for you too. It's living intentionally. Why am I here? Why am I alive? I live to know the real him, to make the real him known, to learn to love and be loved. And if I can connect what I'm doing, what I'm giving my energy to, no matter how random it is, whether it's focused on me or someone in my family or someone I'm interacting with or a business decision or ministry decision, what I'm going to spend my money on, what I'm going to entertain myself with, all of those things, if they can line up, if what I'm doing can line up with even one of those areas, is this helping me grow in the knowledge of what God is really like? Or is this helping me make known who I've realized God to be? Or is this helping me learn how loved I am? Or is this not just learn how loved I am, but learn how to receive love and let it in? And is this helping me learn to love others? Or love myself, or love God? So that's my little orientation statement, motto, theme, whatever you want to call it. I hope that's helpful to you. But that's what this book is really about. That's what us focusing each month on a different aspect of who God is all about, is growing in the knowledge of who he is and what he's really like. So good job for hopping on here, and for especially those of you that have been with me for a while, or maybe since even the beginning of the year. I hope that you're feeling your perspective expand, and your understanding of he's not just good, but all the ways that he's good. He doesn't just solve the issue of sin, but he solves all the consequences and effects of sin. He isn't just the God who wants us to know him, but he's the God who wants us to know him intimately and do life with him and in him and know him so well that we reflect how he is, and we show up, we care about the things he cares about, and we access who he is and who he wants to be for a person or for a situation or for an issue in the world. And we are on a crash course right now for how to show up and make a difference in society. We're going to have more and more opportunities as the years come, and that is a good thing. All right, here we go. I'm on page 84 if you have the book, and I'm just about halfway down the second paragraph. Actually, I'm going to read a couple of sentences that I ended with yesterday to kind of segue into where we're starting. How we settle for a version of some distant God who is like the mafia boss that must be paid off and appeased. Christians do it too. We want God, but somehow we're easily deceived into thinking we can perform to get him. So we create our version of performance that is difficult enough to be some level of sacrifice, but still attainable in our own strength. How's that working for us? God loved us so much that he gave us an impossible list, the commandments, so that we would try, fail, and come running to him for relationship rather than settle for religion that leaves us exhausted from futile efforts. God's laws produced, and still do, a dividing line within our hearts. Do we want relationship or do we want religion? Those dividing lines of his laws lead all of us, if we will allow them, and a realization of what we really want, we cannot earn. That humility is the very thing we must have in order to recognize that Jesus, as ordinary as he seemed to be when he walked the earth, was indeed the answer to our desire for closeness to God. As much as I love my Jewish brothers and sisters, and this is me speaking, I must point out that unfortunately, many of their religious leaders in the days of Jesus were so set on working hard at keeping those laws, they couldn't recognize Jesus for who he really was and what he came to do for them. They were too addicted to the pain medicine to trade it in for the real cure. We do that. We get too addicted to the pain medicine to trade it in for the real cure. Jesus came to relieve them and all of us from the propensity we have to earn God's love when it's impossible. In our humanity, there is something in all of us that at least subconsciously believes that if God were to do something really important, he would do it in a way that we would easily recognize it. The most influential people of the time when Jesus lived thought just like we do, that if Jesus was really from God and was his son, he would surely show up just how we would expect him to show up. That didn't happen then, and it still doesn't, because this God is humble. When he shows up, it's with humility, and it takes humility to see him. So, who is God as Redeemer? The Bible, when read through the lens of seeing him being a good God who desires us to be close to him, paints an amazing picture of him as our Redeemer. It's the story of the one who ransomed us from religion and everything that keeps us distant from God. The commandments of the Old Testament, the time period from creation until Jesus' birth, were a big part of what Jesus taught about later in the New Testament, the second part of the Bible. Jesus reminded us that he came to fulfill the law that God had given to Moses. Fulfill means to bring to completion or satisfy. Jesus satisfied the commandments of God so we could have the benefits of them in our lives without having to perfectly fulfill them ourselves. Jesus, being fully God but limited to our earthly perspectives, lived the only perfect life that has ever been lived. He then was raised from the dead by God after being crucified as our sacrifice on a cross in order to defeat the last thing we are incapable of defeating, death. Our Redeemer cares about our lives now and in the hereafter. We have been redeemed from sin and from death. Can your religion do that? If the laws of God were meant to connect us with our need for a Redeemer, then should we still work on our behavior? Yes. Once we own the fact that we can't and don't have to make ourselves close to God because Jesus did it for us. We can't earn God's favor, but we still want to have a life that is full of true freedom, right? For example, when God tells us not to lie, it's not so we will please Him, but because lying actually degrades who we are. It makes our words lose power and effectiveness and ultimately leaves us outside of the circle of anyone's trust. In His better way of doing everything, He understands how our word is all we have, and honesty is our way of maintaining that. So this switches to Johnny speaking here. God tells us don't steal, not just so we don't offend Him, but again because of how it degrades our spirit. A spirit that feels like it has to steal in order to be fulfilled is a spirit disconnected from one who is the source of all we could possibly need. Stealing is a sign that our internal hard drive is beginning to burn out. Of course, it's obviously unjust toward the one being stolen from. Even in this, we see His heart toward us as humans. By telling us not to steal, He's also saying, I don't want you to have things stolen from you. When God says, don't commit adultery, and by the way, these are part of the commandments, don't commit adultery. He wants us to obey for very practical reasons other than just honoring Him, which admittedly should be enough. He doesn't want us committing adultery because it's an instrument of murder against our families. Every time someone commits adultery, they are in fact bringing death to whatever family that they have. If you cheat on your spouse, you're essentially killing your marriage and your family unit. The repercussions of adultery are felt beyond the marriage and family and into the extended family. Ditto for the other party involved in the adultery. The fruit of adultery has never been and never will be good. It will always end in some kind of serious pain and damage. Even if you never get caught and the damage seems limited, you will have been guilty of stealing trust from your mate. Whatever part of your heart you have given the other party, you're withholding from your spouse. There's no need to belabor this point because there's almost universal understanding that adultery goes beyond offending God to being extremely damaging to everyone even remotely connected. And what about premarital sex? How can it be bad for two people in love to be physically intimate? It isn't, as long as those two people will enter into a lifelong covenant of commitment before God first. If you already recognize adultery as damaging, sex before marriage is just pre-adultery. Most adulterers will also have been immoral before marriage. Someone who is willing to trample over the covenant of marriage is usually someone who never respected covenant to begin with. Both are just profound manifestations of selfishness. I want what I want when I want it, even if God knows how everything will function best. Can anyone argue that a society that innately followed the 10 Commandments would be the most healthy society? It does get complicated when we try to figure out who would enforce morality, but I don't think any reasonable human being thinks a lying, cheating, sexually promiscuous society is a healthy foundation for raising a child in. God has given us all the ingredients for having a successful and blessed life. He gives us rules so we don't hurt ourselves with the good things He gives us. We don't let our infants play with fire at all, and we let our teens do so only under strict guidelines and supervision, even though fire is good in the right context. When we're older, we have free access to matches and lighters, but we must use utmost care because fire can create great damage. Similarly, God gives us the great gift of sex. When we're young, it is not to be used at all, and even when older, we do so following great safety guidelines. As with fire, the guidelines by parents are not an attempt to be control freaks. God has a reason for everything He asks of us. For every no He gives us, there's a good reason other than because I said so. There is a why to everything, but as with our kids, it's good for us to be okay with not understanding sometimes and choosing to trust. God is the most reasonable person in the universe. Let's see where we are time-wise. So I'll start on Monday back into this section where we're talking more into this understanding of sin and its effect on us and why God wanted to deal with sin. It was for layered reasons. Obviously, His redemptive nature and character, that part of who and how He is, Him as a redeemer, is very layered. We see that in Him dealing with sin because sin disconnects us from our Father, and He wants intimacy with us. But then it goes on to a greater understanding of He wants to deal with sin and the effects of sin in our lives because of the pain that He knows that it will cause us. So although we know that we have a Redeemer who has rescued us from sin so that we can have an eternal relationship with our Father, and so He cares about us for eternity, but we also know that doesn't give us a license to just live life the way we want to. When we surrender to Him, we surrender our ways of doing everything to His ways of doing everything. And then that's where I believe we transition from salvation to, what is the word I'm looking for? Starts with an A. I'm going to remember it like after I get off here. Anybody think of that word I'm looking for? Anyway, an ongoing sanctification. It doesn't start with an A. It starts with an S. Sanctification. So we transition from the reality of being saved from that disconnecting sin that Jesus dealt with for us. But then there's this life process of sanctification where we are not that we already have because we believed in Jesus as our Redeemer, the one who fulfilled the law regarding sin for us. But then that process of sanctification is an honor, it's a privilege, it's an opportunity on this side of eternity to do what we can't do once we're in eternity, which is make choices that are difficult in the moment, to choose Him and His better ways. And when we do, we're partnering with bringing His kingdom to earth. Every choice that we make to do things His way, to surrender our way, and we want what we want now, and we want to do it the easier way in the moment and give in the moment. Sometimes we need a refresher on all of these things, even if you've walked with God, for many, many years or your whole life, just to appreciate the opportunity that we have. And the reality is it does please God when we choose His way instead of sin. It does please Him. And it is a way to please Him. But it is not how we earn His pleasure. We already have it because we're His, because He created us. We have our full value, our full worth. And because we have our full value and our full worth, He sent Jesus to prove to us that we already had our value to Him. We were so valuable to Him, He sent Jesus to reconnect us to our Father and to teach us how to live surrendered, not to our flesh and to the easier ways of doing things, but to His kingdom and His better ways. So, for you today is just such an worship song. It's a new one that I found. I had never heard it before. It's by Maverick City Music, called Mighty One. Mighty One. And I just put it on repeat, just been listening to it over and over again. It's just focused on him and how amazing he is, how good he is, how powerful he is. And the two people that sing it worship. So many of these worship leaders, grateful for them. What would we do without our worship and worship and lead the way? Todd, Delaney, and Maryanne one. I hope that you'll take some time. And I just want to pray for you as you go into your weekend right now. Father, I bless my brothers and my sisters that have been here with me today, and um, I just see you just wrapping yourself, the essence of who you are and how you love around each one of them right now. Just like a cocoon, just coming up around them and just loving them into a place of strength and loving them into a place of clarity. I ask God that this weekend would be like that for each one of them, that they would feel, no matter how busy they are or how still they are, that they would just feel that cocoon of your love and your presence around them. And we know what happens inside of a cocoon. New things. New things. God, I ask that you would do new things in every single one of your sons and daughters, in that place of safety in your heart, being held by you. Let them feel it, even physically. Just feel that weightiness of your glory and your presence that steadies us and calms us. And God, everywhere where things feel like so broken and so complicated that you couldn't possibly make them better, I ask God that you would just renew in them that trust and that simple childlike faith to believe that not only can you, but you want to and you plan to. Your plan A is always available. Your plan A is always available. No matter how many times it's gotten messed up and just changed around and it needs to be started all over again or rebooted or unraveled, you always are able to recalculate back to plan A. You make our messes into something that is better than plan A ever could have been. And that is because you are our beautiful, faithful Redeemer. And we love you so much. We thank you for your love for us. Thank you, Jesus, for every choice you made, moment by moment. You walked in our shoes, and you did it perfectly. And we're so grateful for you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It is in your name that we pray. Amen. All right. Go and have an amazing weekend. Get refreshed, do something fun. And I'll be back with you on Monday.